You're listening to Short History Shorts audio, where history speaks louder than images. Ostracism was one of the most unusual political practices in the ancient world, a strange yet potent safeguard embedded within the radical democracy of classical Athens. At its heart, ostracism was the practice by which Athenian citizens could vote to exile one of their own for a period of 10 years, without trial, without formal charges, and without confiscating property. It was a weapon of politics wielded in public view, meant not to punish crimes but to prevent the rise of tyrants or overly dominant political figures. Yet it also reflected the complex, often precarious balance between liberty and order in a society that prided itself on citizen rule. To understand ostracism, one must first understand the political context that gave birth to it. Athens, at the turn of the 6th to the 5th century BC, had undergone seismic changes. The tyranny of the Pisistratids had been overthrown, and the reforms of Cleisthenes in 508–507 BC had established a radically participatory political system in which thousands of citizens had a direct hand in governance through the assembly. This openness to citizen involvement was unprecedented, but it also came with fears. Fears that a demagogue, a war hero, or a charismatic speaker could gather too much influence and bend the democratic system toward personal rule. It is in this environment, around 487 BC, that ostracism emerges in the historical record. The term itself derives from ostrakon, meaning pottery shard, because Athenians would scratch the name of the person they wished to exile onto broken pieces of ceramic. This was an ingenious use of everyday waste material, for paper was scarce and expensive. The process was simple in principle, but tightly bound by ritual and timing. Each year, the Athenian assembly would meet to decide whether or not to hold an ostracism that year. If the decision was affirmative, a second meeting would be scheduled later in the year in the agora. On that day, citizens, often thousands of them, would gather and write a single name on their shard. The person who received the most votes, provided a quorum of at least 6,000 votes was reached, would be exiled for 10 years. There was no formal defense, no accusations read aloud. It was pure prevention, aimed at nipping political dominance in the bud. The exiled citizen did not lose property or civic rights, and after 10 years they could return without stigma. Ostracism's power lay in its public and preemptive nature. It made clear that no matter how powerful a citizen might become, the collective will of the people could remove them from the stage. The earliest and perhaps most famous ostracism was that of Hipparchus, a relative of the former tyrants, signaling that the Athenians would tolerate no return to autocracy. Yet ostracism was not always used against would-be tyrants. It became a tool in factional struggles between rival political leaders. Themistocles, the architect of Athens' naval power and hero of the Persian Wars, was ostracized around 471 BC, likely more because of jealousy and political rivalry than genuine threat to democracy. Similarly, Cimon, the son of Marathon hero Miltiades and a champion of pro-Spartan policy, was ostracized in 461 BC as Athens shifted toward more radical democracy and hostility toward Sparta. In such cases, ostracism acted as a political pressure valve, temporarily removing a divisive figure and allowing the body politic to cool. The ritual of the ostracism day itself was as much a civic festival as a grim political act. Citizens gathered in the agora, milling around the pottery shards laid out for inscription. Illiterate citizens could ask others to write names for them, though this could lead to manipulation. Archaeologists have found piles of ostraca with identical handwriting, suggesting organized campaigns to target individuals. In the lead-up to an ostracism, propaganda and persuasion filled the air. Speeches in the assembly, whispers in the marketplace, rumors spread in the workshops. Sometimes the decision was foregone. Other times it was a surprise, as shifting alliances at the last moment could swing the result. The psychological impact was profound. Even the most celebrated statesmen knew that the people's favor could turn suddenly, and that popularity one year could become a liability the next. The system thus encouraged moderation, or at least a careful calibration of one's public image. But ostracism was not without critics. Some argued that it was prone to abuse, a blunt instrument that removed valuable leaders for reasons of envy or momentary political fashion. Others noted that it did nothing to address underlying policy disputes and could leave the city weaker in times of crisis. Indeed, ostracism's effectiveness declined over the decades. By the late 5th century BC, other forms of political prosecution, such as the graphe paranomen, a suit against illegal proposals in the assembly, had begun to supplant it. The last known ostracism occurred in 417 BC, when Hyperbolus, a minor and unpopular politician, was exiled. His removal was so obviously the product of elite manipulation that the Athenians seem to have lost faith in the institution thereafter. Yet the legacy of ostracism endured in political thought. It was a dramatic reminder that democracy is not only about empowering citizens, but also about protecting the system from its own excesses. It embodied a paradox. In order to preserve the equality of all citizens, the community had to be able to temporarily exclude one. Archaeologically, ostracism has left a rich record. Thousands of ostraca have been unearthed in the Kerameikos and Agora excavations, bearing the names of famous figures, Themistocles, Cimon, Aristides, and others, sometimes accompanied by insults, crude drawings, or statements of grievance. These shards are a tangible connection to the hands of ancient Athenians, each a small voice in the chorus of democracy. In the modern imagination, ostracism has taken on a broader meaning, social exclusion in general. But its Athenian origin was something far more formalized, a legal act embedded in the rhythms of the democratic calendar. It was both a civic ritual and a political safety mechanism, unique in its blend of informality, a name on a broken pot, and institutional authority. In the grand sweep of Athenian democracy, ostracism stands as one of its most curious experiments, a people's veto on prominence itself. It reminds us that democracy, in its original and rawest form, was as much about protecting the collective from the overmighty individual as it was about granting freedom of action. For Athens, a city constantly balancing on the edge between chaos and control, that veto could be the sharpest tool